Serious, parents of Reddit who cut your children out of your lives, what was the final straw? I've had to, hopefully temporarily, cut off my 19 years old, technically ex-step, daughter. She's gotten caught up in an abusive relationship with a guy nearly 10 years older than her. She quit her job, abandoned her lease, stopped paying all her bills, including a car I co-signed on, and stopped talking to all of her family. I'm the only relative she has that lives in the same city as she does, so she'll call or stop by out of the blue, sobbing hysterically about something he's done, usually stinking of pot and BO, in clothes that haven't been washed in weeks. So, I end up dropping a bunch of money on stuff she needs, trying to help, and then a couple days later she goes back to him and blames me, somehow, for their fight. It's just heartbreaking. I mean, I want to help her, but I both emotionally and financially couldn't afford to keep perpetuating this cycle, so I had to tell her I was done. I hope she finds a way out soon. You are enabling her. Only help her literally leave, including leave the area. My son was around 25, living with some buddies in a 1-bedroom apartment. I gave him my car and insured it for a year. He fried the clutch by trying to turn a 1990 Miata into a drifter. I paid to fix it. I bought him a phone, some decent clothes and pulled in a favor to get him a job. He was fired within a month for failing to show up. I told him I could no longer afford to pay for his phone. After 6 months, he then posted a hateful post to my Facebook saying essentially that I'm a horrible father because I never did anything for him. He then disappeared from my life. I've tried to track him down a few times, but have really only uncovered some arrest records and mugshots. He'll be 37 in August. My son is 14 and currently living in residential treatment facility again. I don't see him coming home ever again if I can help it. He's had lifelong emotional problems that led to violent meltdowns 2 or 3 times a day since he was a toddler. Living with him was a nightmare. He attacked his younger sister constantly. When he was 8 he got angry we had to leave the park, so he picked up a piece of metal fencing, hid it and then attacked me in the car with it while I was driving. We had to have a rule about where he could sit in the car because he attacked me so many times. We had to send him to inpatient treatment because it was unlivable for his sister. He was living with his grandparents until he burned their dog with a lighter. He has no empathy for anyone and very little emotion. Even his doctors have admitted there's not much to be done for kids like him, psychologically. The last straw was when he put dairy in his severely allergic sister's food just because he wanted to hurt her. He was mad she was going out somewhere he wasn't, even though she was going with her friends, a bunch of 10-year-olds. And it wasn't something he would enjoy anyway. After that it was obvious he just can't be safe around other people. Honestly, I hate him. We never bonded and he's so hard to be around that I can't think of anything I like about him. He doesn't really have interests and his only real moods are sullen, bored or raging. He's very smart and if he didn't waste it on being cruel and malicious he might be able to make something of his life, but it doesn't seem to be going that way. I sometimes wonder how I even gave birth to him. My 17-year-old son, a weightlifter, decided to beat my husband up and break his nose. A series of mental health issues related to paranoia. I cut him out because I honestly feel like he'll kill us. Hard to talk about, but my stepbrother murdered his neighbor for drug money. From what I've heard the neighbor was a sweet kind old man and my stepbrother had never been known to be the violent type. He is never coming out of jail, so his parents have opted to never see or speak to him again. My brother is a rage addict. He has been since his late teens. Our father was also and died from it. He would have super violent outbursts and attack people and destroy property. The thought of his screams he would throw at people make me so uncomfortable and uneasy, and I thought about cutting him out every day. I never could. I sent him to multiple treatment facilities, almost always resulting in failure. I never shamed him for failing. I've never been an addict and I don't know what that struggle is like. Eventually he spent some time in jail. He got out and went right back to drugs. Some of his drug friends stole things from my grandparents. I sent him to more facilities. It seemed like nothing helped and he cut himself off from a future. The one thing that kept me from cutting him off was his honesty with me. He would lie to our relatives, but with me he told the truth and we talked about ways to get out of issues. I never judged him, gave him money or supported his habit. I would buy him clothes or food at restaurants. I watched him eat it. and I stayed patient when he was incoherent. I was watching him slowly become less and less of himself. One day he tried a new program on his own. He's been going to group meetings every day for nearly 2 years. I just came home from a year-long deployment, and when my chunky brother with a driver's license, car and full-time steady job that he's held for a year and been promoted in, hugged me, held a conversation the whole way home and seemed so level-headed I broke down crying. My brother was back, still a addict, but instead of actively using he was actively preventing. I never cut him off completely. I couldn't. I'm so proud of who he is and how far he's come. It's like every day he pulls himself out of a deep hole and dodges hurdles left and right to stay sober. I'm glad I stood by him and supported him, even if in the end it was him that helped himself. He'll be 2 years sober this summer. So glad he's sober. He's very lucky to have a sibling like you. My adopted mother adopted her newborn nephew when I was 15. When he was around 5, our mother died, and since I was adopted the state took him, and he was adopted by a wonderful family that essentially adopted my husband, kids, and I also. He grew into this hard-headed teenager who knew everything and listened to nobody. Everyone tried to talk to him, explain that he was headed in a terrible direction, but he heard none of it. One day he followed his friends right into a terrible situation where an innocent person lost their life at the hands of my brother and the other jackasses he hung out with. He is now serving about 35-40 years for his bulls. I was adopted and raised by his blood aunt, who started beating me at a year old. She never hit him. He never knew the pain of a beating or abuse. This kid got a beautiful ride through life. His new adopted family was rich, kind, all-inclusive. Something I never had. He would never take responsibility for his actions. Everything was everyone else's fault. He would send me the most ignorant prison letters about the man holding him down. I told him no man held him down to do the stupid crap he did. It was too much like dealing with my adoptive mother all over again. I haven't spoken to him in over 10 years. My parents are recovering alcoholics. They got sober after I moved out at 18. Even though they were both very high functioning throughout most of my childhood, for example, held good jobs, etc., they were emotionally and physically abusive at times to each of us, except for my second brother who was heavily favored, which is common with alcoholics. I am the third of 4 kids, 3 boys then a girl. I think my mother is a narcissist as she displays all of the traits to the line. I moved to Seattle over 22 years ago from CT. My dad has never once come to visit. My mom only once. After my only son was born in 2006. My dad will send empty birthday wishes, but has never made an effort to meet or know my son. He has been sober for 15 years. It's incredibly painful. I am so numb to their neglect and abuse when it is directed at me, that perhaps this is the only way they feel they can continue to hurt me. I honestly don't know. I've tried to address it over the years only to have my words fall on willfully deaf ears. It's a total mind frick to have horrible parents. One thing it does do though is it makes me be a better dad myself. This bulls ends with me. To all of you that have good parents, I am incredibly happy for you. I hope to never have my son talk about me as I have about my parents in a post like this one day. The best thing you can do is give your son the life you didn't have growing up. I'm sorry for all the pain you've felt at your parents' hands, but I really admire you for rising up to be a better parent than they were. Cut out of my dad's life in high school when I asked to live with him for the last 2 years of high school. It was okay since we didn't really get along and he had my 2 younger bros and a new family. My mother and I wrapped it up at 25. I was really toxic to this woman for around ages 20-25. We had been partners in crime up until then and had a really close relationship my entire life. I started getting really angry as other underachievers do at 18 and really hated the corporate ladder I was starting. She was a very strict and angry woman when I was ages 2-10 since she was a single mother and doing basically everything for me throughout my childhood. When I hit 18, I hadn't been really making great money or doing anything to better myself, so we started fighting about it daily. At 20, we eventually had a blowout and she changed the locks. And even though I was filled to the brim with anxiety, I realized, after a week or so, that you really can make it in America, so long as you're employed. I'm still kind of toxic, but only on Reddit for fun, and it feels really vindicating to know I'm not born butthole. I really just think it's two sides of it, and there's years and years of abuse that goes both ways. If you are constantly vicious with your mother and feel bad about yourself for spazzing on anyone in general, then you really gotta wake up to the possibility of a solo and autonomous life. It's the lack of control and the constant threat of betrayal that makes you feel this way. It does seem real scary being emotionally and socially alone for it all, but at the end of the day, you and your parents are causing these issues for one another, and your only option is to dip your toes in the pool of the world before your mom throws your butt in with the help of local law enforcement. Man, there are a bunch of judgy McJudgesons on here. If my kid goes nuts and turns dangerous, adios muchacho. Did that several times. He's 25 now, and lives about 30 miles away from me, and I hear about him from his sister occasionally. He's had the same job for several years, and he has a vehicle, so he's doing well. Just don't want him around his little brother. Neither does the little brother. His H addiction is what led me having to learn to love him from a distance. 5 years ago, his 9-year-old sister found him hanging in his closet and I had to cut him down. He has been in and out of jail for not only the drugs but for stealing a car, breaking into people's houses, and breaking into people's cars. He has stolen from every family member he has. His 2 younger sisters are 14 and 12 now. I have finally gotten them to a place where they're not in that dark place after all of the trauma that they have gone through watching their brother OD several times and not understanding why he doesn't want help. They are starting to come out of the dark place where they are laughing again and they're wanting to interact with people again and not hide. I have had to learn how to love him from a distance to protect them and their fragile well-beings. He is an adult now. He was raised with morals and values and knowing right from wrong, and he has to be the one to choose that he wants help. He also has to realize that the decisions he has made has brought him to the road he is on. We have had to file bankruptcy for all the money that we have spent trying to put him in rehab several times. But he says that he enjoys getting high too much, and now that he is addicted, he has to get high now. He also has a baby on the way, and he has tossed the mother of his child to the side, but we are standing by the mother and will always be there for the mother and the child regardless of what happens with my son. My husband and I of almost 20 years have almost divorced twice over this. I have been in and out of the hospital because of my health issues and dealing with the stress and emotional turmoil of not only seeing my daughters go through what they're going through but what my son has gone through, and not knowing what I can do to help him because there is nothing I can do to help him. He knows I love him, but this is something that he has to do on his own. I adopted my second wife's 2 kids. The younger one would talk crap on me to all his friends. They told me, because they all thought I was cool, he was diagnosed as schizophrenic, ended up on juvenile probation past the age of 18, was smoking pot on the back porch, and trying to talk his 11-year-old half-brother into joining him. This is less than a year after their mother died of an OD. When I found out, he was at his sister's house. I called him, and he told me to frick off. I told him to find a new place to live, since he obviously didn't respect me or my rules. Since then, he threatened me, my fiancé, and to kidnap his half-brothers. I've seen him physically attack a cop, and that's not the only time. He won't take his meds. Frankly, he scares me. You have been visited by the IT lizard. Upvote or experience bad internet for a month. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.